Video lesson 1.6, the Inca. This will most likely be our last video lesson of Unit 1, so take really good notes on the Inca. Just to give you a little bit background information on the Inca, they are a South American civilization located in Peru, Chile, Ecuador, and Bolivia. So they are the green area labeled with a 13. And then you can see on the map also the red area is the Aztecs and the purplish fuchsia area is the Maya. So you can see how much bigger, more vast their empire was, and also how much more south it was. And if you remember from our map quiz, you'll remember that the Andes Mountains are located exactly in this region. So that is something that the Inca also had to deal with. So they peaked from 1300 CE to 1500 CE, so about the same time period as the Aztecs, but after the Maya. Okay, our social structures. Let's see if I can. There we go. There were over 10 million people in the Inca Empire, and there were very strong divisions between the elite and the chicha, which was their slang for commoners. So Inca commoners were just called chicha. And there was great divisions. Politically, you can see how long their empire, and remember from the map before, we can see how vast it is. So they had to use military strength and diplomacy to conquer other civilizations that existed in the Andes and unify them under the Inca Empire. So they built this massive empire through diplomacy, which is negotiation politically, and military strength. And it was the 9th ruler, who is pictured in red, who really built this vast empire using his strong military. So he really started the expansion of the Inca, and then the 2 time periods after that, that yellow and orange color on the map, you can see how they expanded his progress even further. And they also kept control of this empire through several means, which we're going to talk about a few of them. But one of them was through mita, which is 2 months of forced physical labor for the state. So it was sort of like how in some countries you have to serve in the military as a citizen. In the Incan Empire, you have to work for the state. So it's unpaid labor, basically volunteering to work the land for free for 2 months. And you get a lot of benefits out of that. So they had a very strong political organization. The leaders pitched themselves as saviors of the people. And similar to the Maya, they were broken up into smaller states. However, these were just districts or provinces. So they were ruled by a representative of the king, but there was one king overall. So in that way, they're similar to the Aztecs. So they're kind of a hybrid of the two governments. So they had administrative districts ruled by representatives, similar to how the United States, each state has a governor, but those governors are all underneath the president. And we're going to talk more about the road system, but this road system was very technologically advanced and really helped connect the empire so that all those different people could communicate. And remember, they're in the Andes Mountains, which are some of the highest mountains in the world. And so they needed this way to travel quickly so that they could rule their empire effectively. And so some of these representatives of the king would just be local authorities of the conquered people. So they might take over a city, and then they'd say, okay, you were a leader, now you're a leader under the Inca king, and you will be part of the Inca Empire. And then they resettled those local populations. They were also very strong warriors, which is how they were able to conquer so much of South America. So this picture here is a very famous landmark. It's known as Machu Picchu. And it is a prime example of terrace farming. So you might have heard of this term terrace farming before. If you look right over here, you can see the steps into the mountainside. So these are very jagged mountains. So they would cut steps into the mountainside so that plants and agriculture and crops could grow on level ground. So this is one of their most advanced ways that they interacted with the environment. They used terraced farming. And the other thing that they did was they had very fine masonry. So they carefully fit stones together, almost like a puzzle. So they didn't even need to use mortar or cement, and that's how these terraces would be held up by stone walls. This is an example of the paved road system that I discussed earlier. It was 14,000 miles long, and so this really allowed them to connect the vast empire and allowed for quick deployment of the military and improved communication between the different city-states, different representatives, and the king. The last way that they interacted with their environment is an example of infrastructure. So they built these suspension bridges through mountains, and you can see an example of a modern suspension bridge. We still use this similar technology of suspending bridges, and this allowed them, again, to adapt to their extremely mountainous environment. So instead of having to go all the way down into the valley and all the way back up the hill, they could just cross the valley. Okay, Incan culture. The Inca did not have a writing system, but they still were able to keep records using quipu, which were system of knots used to track data. So you can see this top picture is a picture of a quipu. And so this allowed them to keep track of taxes, keep accounts of their goods that they traded, etc. And they had these things called llamas, may have heard of them, and alpacas, which are basically the same thing. And llamas and alpacas were so important to the Inca that they were buried with the dead. And they were used for transportation, fuel, wool, meat, I'm sure on some occasions. And their wool is very soft, and even today it's a very valued commodity. They also valued gold, and so they also practiced mummification of the dead. And so with the dead, along with llamas and alpaca, they would also bury gold. And they also were rich in silver, so they had a lot of silver. Another thing about their culture is that their road system created a universal language called Quechua. And Quechua meant that every person in the Incan language would speak Quechua. So that meant people in the north could communicate with people in the south. That is something that the Aztecs and the Maya didn't really have. So they had to convert those local citizens into speaking this universal language. And also they had a universal religion. And they were polytheistic, but their religion was based around one sun god. So, like I said before, this is a picture of their terraced farming. They were an agricultural economy, so they grew lots of things and were able to trade them with other cultures and throughout the empire. And the tribute, similar to the Aztec tribute, is a form of taxes. And the mita, so you would pay your taxes, but you would also pay with your labor, and you wouldn't get paid for it, so they would use your labor, which was valuable. That was the mita. And those were the currency of the empire. They didn't have a currency like the Maya had. But the government did create an extensive food storage system. So you can see these houses, the little huts back here, little silos. That's where the grain would be stored. So if they ever ran out of food or didn't have a good growing season in one part of the empire, they could take the crops stored in another part of the empire and transport them down along that system of roads, and those people would still be provided for. They were also an extremely wealthy empire because they had all that gold and silver naturally there, so those were valuable products for all people, and so they were able to trade gold and silver for other things and make very expensive pieces of jewelry if measured by today's standards. Okay, that is all of the video. Remember to take the quiz on Edmodo when you are finished with the notes.